On July 4th, a group of friends took a boat out to Horn Island, off the coast of Mississippi. By the time they came back to shore, one of them wasn't with them anymore. 18-year-old Nolan Xavier Wells was still out there. 2 days later, on the morning of July 6th, a U.S. park ranger found his body at the northwestern tip of the island. That's the outline of what happened. What hasn't been settled is why or how. Today, July 22nd, the answer everyone has been waiting for finally arrived. And it wasn't the answer anyone expected. Before we go further, a note on what this is. This is a real, ongoing case involving a real family still waiting for answers about their son. Nothing in this video is dramatized, and nothing here is resolved. Some of what we cover, including a forensic detail from the autopsy, may be difficult to hear. We're presenting it plainly and without unnecessary detail, but we wanted you to know that going in. If this is your first time here, this is CAC Crime Trending, and we cover cases like this one as they actually develop, not after the fact. Subscribe, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's get into the report. After Nolan's body was recovered, it went through Mississippi's State Medical Examiner's office, the standard process for any death under investigation. But his family didn't wait on that process alone. Within days, they and their legal team arranged for a second, independent autopsy paid for by former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick. The family's decision to commission a second exam wasn't a rejection of the state's authority to investigate. It was a response to how slowly information was coming out, and a way to make sure there was a record the family had direct access to, independent of any single agency. Representing the family through this process is civil rights attorney Ben Crump, a name that's been attached to a number of high-profile police involved in civil rights death investigations over the past decade. Crump's role here has been to manage the release of information to the public and to press for a transparent, thorough investigation at every level, including a request for federal involvement. Before the findings were made public, the family's legal team made a point of introducing the person who actually conducted the independent exam. That's Dr. Robert Mitchell, a board-certified forensic pathologist. Mitchell isn't a name attached to this case for optics. He served as the chief medical examiner for Washington, D.C. from 2014 to 2021, a role that put him in charge of investigating deaths across the entire district for 7 years. He's also held the position of president of Howard University Hospital, served as chief medical officer of the Howard University Faculty Practice Plan, and chaired the university's Department of Pathology. He currently serves as president of the National Medical Association, the oldest and largest professional organization representing Black physicians in the country. Over 2 decades, Mitchell has conducted or overseen thousands of autopsies. The family's legal team framed his involvement as a matter of credibility. Whatever this report said, it was coming from someone with the standing to be taken seriously on either side of the outcome. Here's the finding. Both the cause of death and the manner of death are listed as undetermined. That word carries weight, and it's worth being precise about what it means, because it's easy to read it the wrong way. Undetermined doesn't mean nothing was found. It doesn't mean the death was accidental, and it doesn't mean foul play has been ruled out. It means exactly what it says. Based on the evidence available right now, a forensic pathologist cannot say with confidence how Nolan died or under what circumstances. That's a starting point for more investigation, not an ending point for the case. The report did include one specific physical finding. Examiners noted red discoloration in the soft tissue at the back of Nolan's head. Importantly, there was no skull fracture and no laceration to the skin in that area. In forensic terms, that's a finding that raises questions without answering them. It's not nothing, but it's also not enough, on its own, to establish what happened. There's also something worth noting about what wasn't in this report. The independent autopsy did not include a toxicology report. That means there's currently no independent finding on whether any substances were present in Nolan's system at the time of his death. That's a gap, and it's one that either the state's autopsy or further testing would need to address. Which brings up the other track running in parallel to all of this. Mississippi's State Medical Examiner's Office conducted its own separate autopsy on Nolan Wells. As of today, those results have not been released publicly. So right now, there are 2 autopsies connected to this case. One, commissioned privately by the family, has been made public with an inconclusive result. The other, conducted through the official state process, remains unreleased. That gap between what the family's team has shared and what the state has not is itself part of the story. It's a large part of why the family and the organizations backing them have been pushing publicly for more transparency rather than waiting quietly for an official update. That gap is exactly the kind of thing that gets buried once a news cycle moves on. If you want to see whether that state autopsy actually gets released or just quietly disappears, subscribing is the only way you'll know. We're staying on this one. In Crump's own words at the news conference, this report is only part of the puzzle. He was direct about it. This finding gives the family and the public real information, but it leaves more questions unanswered than it resolves. That framing matters because it sets expectations correctly. This isn't a case that closed today. If anything, today's announcement confirms that it's still very much open. A number of organizations and public figures have attached themselves to this case, and it's worth being clear about what each of them has actually done, rather than treating their involvement as vague support. The NAACP's National Board of Directors adopted a formal resolution of condolence for the Wells family on July 18th. That resolution didn't stop at condolence. It explicitly called on local, state, and federal authorities, including the U.S. Department of Justice, to conduct an in-depth, transparent review, both of how Nolan came to be separated from his group on the island and of everything that happened in the hours before his body was found. That's a formal, on-record call for federal-level scrutiny, not just a statement of sympathy. Reverend Al Sharpton has also stepped in, offering a $50,000 reward for information leading to an arrest and conviction in the case. Sharpton has been careful in his public statements not to get ahead of the evidence. At Nolan's funeral, he put it plainly, nobody can say yet that this was racially motivated, and nobody can say yet that it wasn't. That's a notably restrained position from a public figure with a long history in civil rights cases, and it reflects the same posture the rest of the case has taken so far. Push for answers, but don't manufacture a conclusion the evidence hasn't reached. The case has also drawn public backing from other high-profile figures, including filmmaker Tyler Perry, alongside Kaepernick's funding of the independent autopsy. Their involvement has helped keep national media attention on a case that, without that backing, might have stayed regional. So where does this leave things as of today? There's an open tip line for anyone with information related to Nolan's disappearance or death. Investigators and the family's legal team have said they've already received video and photos from people who were on the island that day, and they're continuing to ask for more, particularly footage or images from the hours between when Nolan was last seen and when his body was recovered. No arrests have been made. No suspect has been named. The state autopsy results have not been released, and the cause and manner of death remain officially undetermined. None of that is a dead end. In forensic investigations, an undetermined finding often shifts the process toward gathering more evidence, additional interviews, and cross-referencing whatever documentation exists, rather than closing the file. What happens next depends heavily on two things: whether Mississippi's state examiner releases its own findings, and whether the push for federal involvement, backed by the NAACP's resolution, leads to a broader review. To summarize what's actually confirmed as of today, the 22nd of July 2026, Nolan Xavier Wells, 18, disappeared during a July 4th boat trip to Horn Island, Mississippi, and was found deceased 2 days later. An independent autopsy, conducted by a highly credentialed forensic pathologist and commissioned by the family, has returned an undetermined cause and manner of death, with one unexplained physical finding and no toxicology data. Mississippi's own state autopsy has not yet been released. The NAACP has formally called for a transparent, potentially federal-level investigation. A reward is active for information, and the case remains fully open. This is a real-life story that's still being written, and we'll be covering it as new information comes out, whether that's the state autopsy, a break in the investigation, or any further developments. If you want the update the moment that happens, subscribe now. That's the only way you'll catch it as soon as it's confirmed, rather than days later once it's already old news.